What's going on, everyone? The Galactic Championships are just under 2 weeks away. For those of you that are actually attending, myself included, I've got a deck, or a couple of them, that I'm at least interested in playing for the event. But I'm going to go over 5 different lists today that have extreme viability in the meta for this Galactic Championship. Some of them are just, well, minor modifications to previous lists that are really good, and some of them have kind of completely changed the shape of the deck due to all the new additions from set 5. All very exciting and hopefully gonna do quite well in the meta. With that said, a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, and let's dive in to our first list. Alrighty, starting off with a strong one in Qira. I moved myself over to the right hand side so you guys could see the sideboard options as well. But this is essentially the same list that people were running back in set 4. Qira has basically one main new addition and another addition that depends on kind of where the meta shapes up on how good it is, and that is Darth Vader and Supremacy Tie. Supremacy Tie is actually way better than in the past. People were playing like Black Sun Starfighter. This actually allows you to use your shield token ability from Qira on Supremacy Tie without it dying. It's actually a really nice Space Sentinel, really solid addition, but only is relevant if Space Sentinel is relevant for you. But it also works with, you know, classic Darth Vader. The other part of it, like I said, was Darth Vader, the new version from set 5. And this is absolutely disgusting with Timely Intervention, and that's really the pairing that you're looking for. Now, you notice I have Data Vault here. I found Data Vault to be quite strong still. I think that you can absolutely go with the ECL direction, and I think there is viability for both options. ECL Vader obviously is excellent. You can kind of modify the deck to add things like Gideon potentially, or even like an ECL Devastating Gunship can be good in the right circumstance. ECLing out Super Laser Technicians can still be very, very good. But overall, I mean, Data Vault, that extra 8 HP difference is going to really help you up against some of the matchups that are a little bit more aggressive. This list, absolutely incredible still, however, because of, well, the overlay barrage with Qira Flip, the new Darth Vaders, the absolute mass value train that you'll get from Vigilance Villainy Command in the old classic Darth Vaders, things like Avenger and Devastator as your top end. You actually have a really nice overall game plan against pretty much every deck in the format. There's not really many decks that you're going to kind of find yourself up against and be like, oh man, this is a bad matchup for me initially. In the sideboard, things like Traitorous have gotten a lot better just because of people running General's Blade more frequently, albeit Traitorous probably not something that you're going to want to well, I should say your opponent's not going to want to be playing General's Blade up against the Power of the Dark Side deck, but Traitors can still be exceptionally powerful, especially for those people that are looking to lean into Chewbacca's. Takedown and Fellow Dragon, just more removal. Palpatine's Return, Annihilator, these are more like longer mid-range matchup, very, very strong plays. And of course, Confiscate for some of the upgrades. There are a lot of things you can do with the sideboard. Again, a lot of things you could do with this deck and make minor modifications. One of the things that we used to play with Qira that I have gone a little bit less on is like Mauls. So Maul, Ambush, Overwhelm, great. But when you have a timely Darth Vader, that kind of fills that slot of that 7-drop Ambusher, right? So definitely various different decisions you can make. I guess the only other new card that I should mention is Chirrut, but this is basically Perimeter ATRT, and you can kind of slot in either one. I put Chirrut in there just because it's a new card, so it's fun to see him. But really, there is minor variations of, you know, value for running a vehicle versus a non-vehicle, right? Like the Perimeter ATRT gets hit by direct hit, which is, you know, destroy target vehicle. But is people playing that, or are people playing that? Not really. So, and then there's other things that hit Chirrut that don't hit the Perimeter ATRT. So this one definitely just kind of like that nice Sentinel body. But overall, this is one of the lists to beat, and still continues to be so after set 4 finished up. This is going to be one that is an exceptional list, and probably one that I personally am leaning towards, mainly because I've always been, if I was playing in a more competitive event period, back in set 1, I was the Darth Vader blue player. Set 2, I was the Bosk blue player, etc., etc. Like, that is what I enjoyed playing. I know I'm about to get some hate for that. Of course, that's why when I'm playing videos or playing decks for videos, I love playing the double red Kylos, because sometimes you just want to jam in a bunch of games. So this is definitely one on my list that I'm heavily considering bringing, just for a decent run of the tournament. And I think, again, if you want to go with ECL, that is a great option. Just modify the deck a little bit to really index towards the ECL and not just purely rely on the Darth Vader. Next up, we've got Han 2. Now, this one's interesting because this is a list that was exceptional in set 4, right? Except you're playing Han Data Vault or Han ECL. This list, although it is the same leader that we've been seeing that was so good, this is one of the major changes, or one of the lists rather, that has had major changes. There are so many new set 5 cards, and they are all quite incredible. So obviously, new base, we're not running Data Vault or ECL, we're running Jedi Temple to generate the Force by attacking with Force units. Why is that relevant? Well, we're playing things like Qira Green, one of the all-stars of this list, allowing you to draw extra cards. It's one of the things that Han always had somewhat of a problem sometimes, which was, okay, I could play things that are cheaper, but sometimes actually run out of cards because I got that discount every single turn. Qira Green refills your hand, boom, transitions great into the late game. ETH Koth dies, becomes a resource. Great option, especially if you're playing this earlier on like turn 2. Like a super laser technician comes in and just gets you to ramp a little bit earlier. We have Mace Windu that comes down and deals 4 if you have the Force. This is amazing to just knock out units. We've got things like Yoda to come down and heal up our base and do some major damage. And then to top it all off, those are just like the new Force payoffs from set 5. But we also have things like Caloran Beck, the new heroism Vader is kind of what I've liked to call this, but the 7/7 that's going to bring another unit along with it. Absolutely massive value card. We have things like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Grogu, which are amazing turn 1 options in Han Solo. Obi-Wan, very, very strong Sentinel. We have so many Force units in the deck. If you look, Obi-Wan, Grogu, Gunji, Adi Gallia, ETH Koth, Qira Green, Mace Windu, all Force units. It's going to have Sentinel a majority of the time. Grogu, one of the best turn 1 plays in the entire game. It does so much work because the value of Grogu is not just dealing 2 to things, it's every unit you play after, you get a resource cost reduction, but the downside is supposed to be that you have dealt 2 damage to it, right? Well, what Grogu does is it takes that downside and makes it a positive, and that is absurd. This is a card you absolutely have to deal with if you are someone that's going to be deploying units onto the board. And then, as I said earlier, we have Gunji and Adi Gallia. These ones not taking advantage of Han's action typically, but it doesn't matter because we just wanted more Force Jedis, because we also have General's Blade in the deck, which is absolutely fantastic. This is one that in some matchups literally just wins you the game. Literally just wins you the game if you have this and you're able to deploy it on your early Jedi units and then kind of turn around and combo that with something else. Because remember, this is on attack the next unit you play. This phase costs 2 less, which synergizes with Han's action. So let's say you go turn 1 Gunji and a turn 2 Blade. That puts you at 4 resources the following turn. You could play Caloran Beck. It's disgusting. So it is really, really tough to deal with. You also have things like Force Throw, which are amazing early interaction alongside with Rebellious Hammerhead and Mace Windu to knock out units. In the sideboard, more late game potential. Some decks that ramp Champs and Duel can be very good. A little bit of interaction, a little bit of upgrade hate. Again, you can go all different directions with the sideboard depending on what you view the meta is going to be like. But overall, absolutely incredible list. And this is one of those that really has changed drastically from the previous iterations of it. If you look at Qira, you're like, oh, it's the same deck. I'm just adding like a better Sentinel and I'm adding a nice ambushing target, right? Great. That kind of fits in the same theme. This changed the entire deck layout, really. It's still a value deck. Like the core theme, you could say, is on point, but the actual lines and strategies that you're taking are a lot different. And that's really fun to see. Really, really fun to see. This is another one that is on my list of interesting to play. Qira and Han 2 were the number 1 and number 2 choices that I immediately thought of. These are the ones I've played the most, and these are the ones that honestly to me seem some of the most strong options for the meta. Next one we got is Vader Yellow. Now, honestly, guys, out of every single deck on the list, if you're looking to bring something and you don't want to invest a ton, this is the list for you. Now, I actually was just talking to some of the patrons over here, and we were actually figuring out that Victor Leader's up to $10 now. So it's definitely risen in price since it's performed so exceptionally well from set 4. But this go wide, create a bunch of space units, end the game with Clone Combat Squadron, Victor Leader, and Darth Vader flip is exceptional. You have tempo advantage plays like Sanction or Shuttle, Geonosis Patrol Fighter, No Good to Me Dead. You even have Overwhelming Barrage to wipe the board. In terms of new set 5 cards, there really wasn't much. But I did add Craving Power. It's something I've been experimenting with Darth Vader, and I found it to be quite strong. It works really well with like Clone Combat Squadron. It's basically just comes in and is a removal option that gives you a little bit of extra power. It does do nicely because you don't have to attach this to a ground unit. It can be any unit whatsoever. So I think Craving Power could be a nice addition, maybe something for the sideboard, but just something to kind of keep in mind. You have really just an amazing game plan. The other one is Forged Starfighter. This can definitely change. A lot of people are playing Mining Guild. I found myself not really running out of cards all that often in this list. It really depends on how you're playing it, but Forged Starfighter, giving you an extra power, and the deck is a little bit more aggressively focused. It's like a more tempo go wide deck, but you do want to end the game, and you don't want to get to late game typically, because if your opponent does have a nice Super Laser Blast, Overwhelming Barrage, you will get reset. So absolutely fantastic in the sideboard. A little bit of hand hate, air superiority just helps you deal with some of the obnoxious ground units out there if they're a problem. A little bit of Space Sentinel, some more ambushing in space, which can be nice, and some upgrade hate as well. This is a very solid and very budget friendly list. If I were to compare that to the other options that you have in the list or in the video today, Yoda's like $10, Home One's expensive, Crate Dragon's expensive, Poe Dameron's expensive, like all these cards are incredibly expensive. And Qira, I mean, don't get me started. We have both Vaders in here, Avengers, Devastators. Like, it is an incredibly expensive deck comparatively. So this is going to be your budget option and going to be an excellent option to compete in the tournament. Alrighty, the next one we've got is probably the most classic one on the list, and probably one that you have all expected, and that is Sabine. Sabine is, and always will be when it's in the meta, something to contend with. This is going to be your aggro deck that you're going to be fighting up against. And no matter what, I mean, Sabine did excellently in set 4, by the way. But Sabine is absolutely a deck that really, really can do some absolutely amazing work. Has a very aggressive curve, still has the Rebel synergies with Fleet Lieutenant, and all the Rebel payoffs like Rebel Assault, and then, of course, all the Rebel units in general. This one is an aggro deck. This one, as much as we can get it to be. The ECL Poe Damerons and Wreckers are absolutely terrifying and can really dominate some decks. And that's one of the things where when I'm looking at like Qira, for example, and trying to decide between ECL and Data Vault, I'm like, okay, well, realistically, I don't know if I want to go ECL because I do think there's going to be a heavy portion of Sabines there. And one of the reasons why I think that is because of it being super early in the format, and people will default back to aggro focused decks. So running ECL Qira is putting you at risk to get completely run over by all the damage coming out and then getting finished off by K2SOs, for causes, and things like that. So that's what I'm kind of thinking about. But realistically, Sabine in general is just a curve out aggro, very, very straightforward list. If you're looking to bring something and don't want to have a lot of practice and just kind of master your own game plan and not really care about what your opponents are doing nearly as much, Sabine is going to be that deck most out of any of the other decks on the list, because this one has that game plan of I kill my opponent, right? Doesn't mean that you can't be a very proficient Sabine player. This is just the one that I think is the most simple out of the 5 on the list. In conjunction with all of the, well, set 5 cards, I think Sabine has a really good chance. It's not actually getting any new cards, but I do think what you're already doing matched up well against what the new set 5 cards are doing. The only cards that are really new are in the sideboard. One of them is Kelleran Beck. That has been slotted in over Ewing reinforcements. I found Kelleran Beck just to be a little bit stronger because of it creating a massive body and getting a 3-drop alongside it. Ewing reinforcements can sometimes get you 3 plays, like a Sabine Battlefield Marine plus 3-drop, which can be nice, but this one just creating a massive unit can sometimes be more obnoxious because your opponents had to have used removal throughout the game to deal with it. And usually people will sideboard out Fell the Dragons if they are running other options like No Glory. But that's only because Poe Dameron and Wrecker are your only targets. They'll slot in things like Takedown. So I do think Tower and Beck is a nice option. And then Kit Fisto's Ether Sprite. This is kind of a fun one. One of the decks that has been pretty good against Sabine is actually Kylo Ren, but also just a bunch of decks that are able to put a bunch of upgrades on things. So like I've seen Chirrets put like Entrenched on, and it can be really tough to get through those situations. Or even like Chilton, Kit Fisto's Ether Sprite can do some decent work by defeating a bunch of upgrades on them, because you don't really have an out to those situations. So I found just a one of there, kind of a fun one. And honestly, there aren't really many new additions for Sabine. It's just that old classic, very solid, very aggressive, and it's still going to put in work. And the last one we're going to talk about today, there are a lot of honorable mentions, by the way, is Cad Red. Actually, this deck is exceptional for what your opponents are trying to do now. One of the biggest things that has really shifted is the change from Tarkin Towns to Data Vaults and things like that. But I actually think Tarkin Town is getting a good amount better in this set. The reason being is, as you saw from, Han, for example, there's going to be a lot of people playing these Force synergy-based decks that kind of want you to be deploying units. And if Han 2, let's say, is a very popular meta option, Tarkin Town just gets a little bit better even then. But Tarkin Town disrupting that initial Force game plan is really nice, and you can really tempo people out. In terms of new cards from set 5, well, realistically, there are 3. Marchion Row is a really nice one if you're playing with a bunch of raid units, and works well with now there are 2 of them, because you have a lot of Underworld cards coming in, and then you've got now there are 2 of them to drop Marchion Row a little bit earlier, and it works well with the new Strike Ship 03, Raid 3, and also Cad Bane himself. Aura Sing is another option. As I said earlier, it's a very aggressive start, very, very tanky as well. But because of Tarkin Town, it's very likely for you to be able to get in a good chunk of damage. So I've found Aura Sing to be quite solid. But overall, the list stays pretty much the same. You're playing the classic Underworld game plan, and you've got some really, really nice finishers in like Ruthless Raider and then Cad Bane deploy to just deal a lot with your opponent. The list hasn't really changed all that much, but you do have kind of a couple of nice options. This is one of the few decks where I view Strike Ship to be very strong. One of the other things that people are playing is like Cartel Spacer, which I think is a viable option. But one of the things I think about is like, okay, if I'm playing up against someone with Blue Leader, what's the outcome? Well, Blue Leader still lives between the 2 of them. So unless I've already dealt with the early units and I deal one with the Cad Bane action, I can't recover. And then Strike Ship is nice because you can still Target Town away opponents' units. But Strike Ship has been pretty solid in this list, particularly because of all your kind of board interactions you may have. But you can absolutely run Cartel Spacer or Zygerian Starhopper instead of Strike Ship, and then you can also just omit the Marchion Rows for like another Zuckuss, for another Jabba, that type of stuff. I think Aura Sing is probably the best out of these 3 that I've seen. But again, Underworld game plan, dealing damage to units, Tarkin Towning away things, getting big things out with now there are 2 of them. The whole game plan is pretty similar, and it does some good work. That is Cad Bane. And that is all 5 lists. As I said, there are a bunch of honorable mentions and things that you could argue are better decks in some circumstances for sure. Ray Green is amazing. You have new Yaddle, new Gunji. All of those work with Ray's abilities. You can play the General's Blade thing similar to how Han works. You can play, your Yodas. You can play the Chirrets, which are excellent. That deck seems to be pretty powerful as well. You have other options like, if you want to go in the direction of Quinlan and more tempo-based game plan, that one didn't really get as much from set 5 as Ray, but still an excellent option. And as I said, there are other leaders, like set 5 leaders, that are pretty good, like Talzin and Obi-Wan. Those are kind of question marks right now, because we haven't seen big tournaments where there's a ton of people playing and them actually doing exceptional, because they haven't existed before, right? So that one is more of a speculatory choice, and I do think if you're going to play Talzin Red or Talzin Green, or if you're going to come in with Obi-Wan Blue, you're going to win some games for sure. Those decks are excellent. Even when you're fighting up against things like Qira or Han, you have a lot of opportunity to win. So you got a lot of options. Really, these are just like a selection of the best decks, and some of the ones that I think are going to be most popular, which is why I decided to put them in today's video. I think absolutely Qira is going to be probably the biggest showing of the tournament. I think that's going to follow up by Han. That's kind of my prediction. I could see that reversed, but I think Qira is still going to be more popular. I think Sabine's going to be a huge showing, and I also think Vader's going to be a huge showing as well. That is kind of why I put these decks, as well as Cad Bane. Just like the decks that were already good, people are going to play them still because they don't want to take a risk. And potentially, if you do take a risk and bring in like the Obi-Wan Blue, and it is as good or has good matchups against what the field is, then you may end up in a situation where you got the better deck advantage, which is something that comes around like once in a lifetime situation. So I'm curious to hear what you all have to say. What are the decks that you're thinking about playing? What are the really, really solid options out there? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you all for the next one.